Welcome to another interesting session on our special lunch series, Perspectives. As usual, we have an informed and knowledgeable speaker to share some of his perspectives with us in this program. Our topic for today is essentially to address the role that ICT, Information Communication Technology, plays in the development of capacity and capability in Africa, across Africa. The whole issue of capacity or capability development, as you'd agree with me, is one that has been very topical and a nagging issue over the years. The United Nations has its own description or definition for capacity, if you like. It describes it as the ability of individuals, organization systems to perform appropriate functions efficiently, effectively, and sustainably. I'd like to emphasize the word sustainably. And therefore, building capacity is the process by which individuals or groups or organizations or societies increase their abilities. So today, even though there are various aspects of development, of capacity development, we will be focusing on human capacity development, an issue of global concern and of regional and local importance. It's so important that, again, the United Nations has gone as far as creating a Human Development Index to try and track or measure the progress that has been made along a number of key indicators that pertain to development. Those indicators include life expectancy, they include health, and they include knowledge and education. Okay? So if we're tracking, as they have done over the years, life expectancy, how long people live, the kind of welfare and health they're exposed to. If we're tracking also the standard of living and we're tracking knowledge and education, it gives us an indication of how nations across the world are progressing. In the most recent report that was released by the United Nations on the Human Development Index, we found that, happily, a number of African countries had made significant progress. Countries like Burundi, countries like the Democratic Republic of Congo, Sierra Leone, several others, Niger, Rwanda, Liberia, Mali, Mozambique. Sadly, Nigeria wasn't one of those nations that had made significant progress. Indeed, the progress that was recorded for Nigeria was minimal. And so looking on an African scale, we want to examine and address in some respect the issues around human capacity development. To discuss this with me today is an expert in human capacity development with a bias for information technology. Mr. Lanre Onasanya is our guest today. Thank you for coming, Lanre. Welcome to this program.
Thank you. Thank you, Adedoyin.
Thank you. Lanre runs a company called Integral Assets. It has a footprint across Africa in nations such as Kenya, South Africa, and Nigeria. And he's done some interesting work. He's got a passion for people, a passion also for using technology to get people to do more with less and to get technology to drive development of humans. So, thank you again, Lanre. I'll start by asking you, how do you dimension this human capacity or capability development challenge? What really is it?
If you look at human capability development, you want to first maybe look at it from perspective of formal education, the K-12, primary school, secondary school, there is that aspect. There is also the aspect of capability development in terms of the workplace, which is people's ability to produce, which is what work is, the kind of work outputs from workplace, structured organizations, small, medium businesses, but whatever is producing to then earn revenue or create businesses or create services for people that they then pay for. So there is that capability as well. So the dimensioning could be in those two respects, the formal education development of just a human person and that of developing the person to produce something that people are willing to pay for. That's kind of how I look at it.
Okay, is the African challenge then for human capacity development, is it different from the rest of the world?
The rest of the world is so big. So there are certain places where that capability challenge will be similar to that of Africa. But I think that because of Africa's history, and that history particularly around, I'll say colonialization and certain challenges that the African had to deal with in terms of the sense of self or what was regarded as good or education. So I think that's peculiar. So anywhere else that's gone through such a development as well, I think will have similar challenges, the sense of the measurement of being educated. So where you may then touch on Western education, there's a concept of the Western education. My question is always, are you saying the African wasn't educated before the Western education, And are you saying there were certain structures of education that the African had? There were certain types of capability the African had in terms of producing. Or yes, of course, once Western science or knowledge has brought some things to it. Sometimes I wonder, what if it was the Eastern science that influenced Africa, or maybe what if it was Africa that went out and influenced the rest of the world when thinking capability. So I think any other region of the world has had that challenge of defining what is education would probably have similar challenges as Africa.
As Africa. Yeah. So in Africa, given the work that you've done across some African countries, how do you see this challenge playing out? What are the tangible, evidence, if you like, that this challenge exists? How does it play out?
I think the biggest part of the challenge is just that definition. So, you just talked about the UN's measurement of these and of those indices. The question is, those indices, where was the African type education? How was that measured in those indices? So I think the bigger part of the challenge is definition. The definition of what is good or what is good enough. The other type of challenge is access, or access to relevant information, and I use relevant in bold letters. What is relevant from a Western education perspective, what is relevant from the indigenous, if we can use that word, perspective. So the definition, there is access to what is relevant education, and sometimes the regular infrastructural challenges, which is across the continent as well. So those remain challenges for the African. Yeah.
Does the sheer population of Africa, does that present a challenge in itself for development?
Look at Asia. You got countries with over 1 billion people. So I think more the infrastructure to provide access. That's where population will matter. Personally, I don't think so. I think if we had adequate infrastructure, if we had adequate access, therefore, the population wouldn't. Or if we look at previous structures that were in place, maybe this access wouldn't be. But when you look at capability development today, it's more holistic. It's more Western, Eastern, African, indigenous. You've got to have all of that together to really develop capability. So there's some of it that population helps, because
indeed it should be a benefit.
It should be a benefit because sometimes when being a Nigerian, we say, and then having to play on the rest of the continent, I kind of find that maybe those countries that have a lot of population, competition therefore is higher or harder, is steeper. And when you already grow up in a competitive situation, then competing on the global scale is just change your position, man. It's not changed competition. So population, or let me say concentrated population, competition for resources creates certain behaviors around competition, which is good for developing capability. Yeah.
I see. So we've got a huge population. It could be an advantage if it's well harnessed. What role does information technology play in all this development challenge?
Huge. Personal opinion, I think information technology is one thing that levels the playing ground. It levels the playing ground. It's having played in the information technology sector for, I don't know, a couple of decades, maybe a little less, and moving into this area of developing capability now, I see really how information technology, it just levels the playing ground. It means that I can have access to the same information that a counterpart in any part of the world would have access to. Now, and not only do we have access, we have equal access, we have timely access. Therefore, it's now left to what I make of it. So in my work today, I subscribe to a number of research studies around brain science, around this area of work, and I've come to unlike back then when there was that time lag, where you could have somebody from a different part of the world who had access to the same information, even if it's just 24 hours ahead, talking about that research information. The person will seemingly be more informed than one is on the African continent. But today, we get access the same time. Therefore, I can make of it. I can create a personal opinion or an opinion from the African perspective, while the other person creates an opinion from their perspective. And therefore, it's a more holistic conversation we can have. Because we got the information at the same time, we've had the same amount of time to work through it. Yeah, so I think information technology is actually the biggest game changer to developing capabilities, the biggest game changer for the African.
So indeed, it could be a leveler.
Oh yeah.
It could be a leveler, as you've said. You've talked about the impact of information, the fact that everybody has that information. No matter where you are, you could have access to the same type of information. Perhaps even in the most remote villages in Africa, if you've got so much as an internet link, you're with the rest of the world.
Yes.
Okay,
yes.
But if we look at the definition of human capacity development, talking about performing functions efficiently and effectively and sustainably, is there a role for IT to improve the way that people do work, the way that people produce, the way that people develop their own capacities to be able to develop the capacities of their nations or of their continent?
Oh yes. Again, I'll say it, information technology is the game changer. So a simple analogy, let's look at the concept of word processing. The early man had to process word using stones and writing on the wall. That's what he was doing. He was trying to communicate something based on what he saw. And man moved to using ink, maybe dipping a stick in the ink, dipping feather in the ink because they realized feather wrote better. Then to chalk on the slate, then to, pen on paper, then to the first typewriters or the first printing machines. All we've been doing is word processing. But if you think about even that typewriter, the manual typewriter, I call it left and right. And if you think about the process of erasing something, and what process people had to go through, tip X or the white thing, that was advanced. You had the pencil-like thing that you rub off the brush, blow. And if you look at today, to do exactly the same thing is just a stroke. So if we look at a work output from the perspective of communicating an idea, sharing an idea with people to get them aligned to do something, and needing to communicate that in writing and see what information technology has done to that seemingly simple process today, where you can write the same thing, edit it, format it in different ways, all of that just to get people to move to do something. If you look at what information technology has done, today it's taken for granted. It's so taken for granted, but that's technology. in different ways. Technology, it was maybe engineering technology with the typewriter. Today is information technology that's impacted that. That's the kind of thing that information technology can do, to the extent of, if you look today, I remember a few years ago when I used to work for Microsoft, and there was this initiative around content on the internet, where Africa was highly disadvantaged. Africa was contributing about 5% of the content on the internet. And there were a number of initiatives, get Africans writing, because, originally we educate orally. That's kind of like our approach. And they get Africans writing, and there were a number of initiatives. But today, Africans are contributing content on the internet. Every post on Facebook, every tweet, so nobody is really needing to do any major initiative. All of that is possible because of information technology. Africans are able to contribute to Wikipedia, whatever it is that is there, Africans can play because they have access to technology. That's what technology does in building capability. That's on the one side. There is the other side of devices, and how devices have really, really moved on this continent in terms of mobile devices. But today it's just a device. Those devices, most devices today, or I'm saying all, are equipped with certain aspects that help you with managing self. Managing self, because with the deluge of information we get today also comes the ability to manage focus. And a lot of devices today are helping people to manage their focus, to concentrate on the things that are important. So the African is not disadvantaged. The device you have anywhere in the world is the device the African will get. In fact, considering the explosion of mobile devices on this continent, you have the affinity of certain countries, certain Africans, to advanced technology devices. I mean, think of the Nigerian. If it's released, they want it, they want to use it, and they have it. It means that the leveling of the playing ground and the ability to leverage those devices today, we just may have some behavioral type things coming out that will be very unique to the African, and with a mix of all of these things, not having access to devices, now having it, the enthusiasm, wanting the best, the competition, really needing to break barriers. So I think information technology is so key to developing capability.
I would agree with you, certainly. What role do you specifically play in this terrain?
Well, my role, I would say it starts from training in the classroom, training people around, in the businesses mainly, around using these simple technologies. Because also what you find is that with the technologies coming up, a lot of people aren't really taking their time to understand how to use the technology to support them in creating that work output that creates value, which is what the business is.
Yeah.
So that I spend quite a bit of my, so that being the one end, to playing around with some research around from the African perspectives. How are Africans using technology for developing their capability? Just paying attention to those and being a voice to compare that with the rest of the world. Yeah, our research capability is not really where it should be, but my personal belief and therefore investment is around, look, I may not have the size of data, but I can work with the data I have. I have in the region of 6,000 to 8,000 contacts across the continent, people in the workplace. I think that provides information that can provide an insight into how Africans use this technology. And to the other end of working with executives, I spend quite a bit of my time in executive coaching work around helping the African executive understand leadership while leveraging technology, because technology at the end of the day is a tool. The issue is we didn't have these tools before, and you have some of our executives today, the amount of time they've spent being exposed to this technology is limited. We have a few that still believe I can still be that successful executive in the workplace without technology. And I'm not saying high-level technology. You know, if you're running a farm today, there's a lot of technology you use. You know, if you want to run a farm of particular scale, and there's an aspect of that technology that's got to be information technology, not just engineering technology or however you want to define that.
Yeah.
So there is an aspect of that. So being the voice to helping executives understand that. So I get to spend time with a lot of, even in terms of the regular workplace, financial services, how do you leverage technology to create alignment? Because in the workplace today, technology has invaded it. It's there, people are using it. And if you then want to be using the old way or the former ways of creating alignment, whereby people's focus is on technology. If I spend 60% of my day looking into some technology thing, that's where I get information, that's what I trust, that's how I'm communicated with, then you've got to play with me in that space as well to help me create alignment, to help me create integrity, to help me produce this value that I need to do, that I need to create. So I work with executives to come to that space and use that space to achieve some of the things they need to achieve to create successful organizations. So that
does sound interesting. From your experience, have you observed any challenges that these executives face in adopting technology effectively? And are you able to distinguish if those challenges are different from senior executives, you know, emerging leaders? Is there any difference?
Oh yeah, there are challenges. And I think the main challenge comes from belief. The belief that I can do this without technology. I think that's really
a mindset thing then.
Yeah, it's a core of developing any capability. Belief. What is the person's belief system? Because if you have someone who say, look, my father ran this business and did it this way, or whoever they're looking up to did the business this way and didn't use all of this, your fancy technology, and they were successful. I think that's the biggest, because when you get the executive who, and I'm not saying technology is all that is going to do it. We need to understand where information technology plays. It's a tool. That's
an enabler, really.
So what tools were being used before and why were those tools being used? Now, what tools are being used today and how do we leverage that? So I think the belief system is the key thing. When you have if you talk to any human capital management or IT person, I get the privilege of straddling both. The challenges they face, the IT guy wants to push technology out there. The executive, he buys it, he likes it. There's a promise that technology brings. However, if you don't work on the people's side, they cannot deliver that promise, and that's what makes the executive think, look, I've spent so much money, I'm not getting that return. So where I work with the challenge I see is them being able to understand that it's a tool, it's still the people that will deliver the value.
Right.
But it's a tool. You need to put it where it is. It's a tool for creating value. So that's the challenge I see that is pretty peculiar to the executive. But once you sort that belief and then show the how to, you also find that there isn't, let me say a second challenge will be, in terms of the approach, there used to be this challenge, it's getting less now, where the adoption of approach from anywhere in the world and wanting to fit that into the African space without adequate customization.
Right.
That is also, and that's what led to a number of the projects not working, and the executives just like, you know what. So those two challenges, first the belief, and secondly the process of adapting. Whatever the approach is, we need to understand it's just an approach. It's an approach, and like most things, the Yoruba proverb, there are many ways to approach the market. So you got to approach the market the way that suits you, maybe, for you to get what you need to get, the most effective way. So the rethinking of the approach, there needs to be a bit more of that fine-tuning or customization.
All right, our final question for you today. We want you to draw on the benefit of your experience from Kenya, from South Africa, from Nigeria. What practical advice would you leave the HR practitioner today who's seeking to do more with less with technology to develop their people?
The key thing is the HR practitioner needs to understand that technology and HR are not two separate things. Yeah, they're not two separate things. I find a number of what is called human capital management practitioners who themselves need to work on their belief around technology. They themselves need to work on it.
So start with yourself.
Yeah, start with it. Leadership always starts with self.
Start with yourself.
Yeah. They themselves need to see that technology is a tool, is a key tool for managing human capital. Because human capital management is about processes. Everybody wants to do things their own way. Human capital management is who lets us know the ideal way to do it, the aligned way to do it to serve the corporate goal. They need to, so that I think that in terms of practical, the human capital person, management person needs to do this themselves. There is, that whole, it's the HR way. Leverage technology because Africans are adopting technology, they are loving it. So use this as the platform to get the otherwise challenging HR practices, get it to them. Let's get it to them. Today you're talking enterprise apps, it's not only just consumer apps. Yeah, if somebody, the new generation of people you're hiring, they have their approach to using technology for their lives, How about adopting that? Meet them where they are. The human capital professional needs to not, play the all. You have to conform to HR. I think the IT industry did that for a while. The IT industry has learned where the IT manager was the powerful guy. I control what technology you get. Today, the consumers, they've taken over. Yeah. I think the human capital management person needs to understand that meet people where they are, give them, infuse in that technology which they like, which they're using, which they're adopting, especially for the new generation. Put there those HR practices. Understand how technology as a tool can serve you and embrace it. Don't leave it to IT. Like IT, come and give us the solution. That would be one practical approach. And I would say looking at the different countries, because the different countries are at different levels and I see this differently. But in terms of general, that's what I'll say.
Excellent. That's been very interesting. Today we've been talking to Lanre Onasanya. He's a human capacity and capability development professional with a bias for IT, with a passion for IT. He's shared with us some of his experience drawn from African nations as far as using IT as an enabler for human capacity development is. He's narrowed in on a few key concepts, the mindset. And for the HR professional, his advice is start with yourself. Look to yourself first. Meet your clients, the people you manage, where they want to be. Use those devices to your advantage. And for all of you, we'd like to thank you for staying with us. Lanre, thank you so much for being with us today.